I, I like that we're actively collaborating here. And in fact, I did not create a presentation because I thought the best use of this time would be to initiate a conversation about where we can go next. Um, so I did make a few notes, I mean tiny notes about a few highlights I wanted to touch. So let me frame that by looking at the context that I'm sure all of you are familiar with, but just as a way of kind of framing the discussion, there's the JCR Licklider approach, which he called man-computer symbiosis, that really came from his frustration as a scientist, as an individual working with information about how he had, in his own words, to spend most of his time getting in position to think. And uh, and in those days, his immediate goal was to be able to directly interact with computers. You know, before the the graphic user interface, the main goal of building these kinds of tools was to enable individuals to interact directly with the computer. So that's kind of the individual approach. And if you read Engelbart's paper, 1962 paper, he talks a lot about the process of augmenting individuals. But then if I would contrast that actually to Engelbart's approach, which really centered the social part of it, the community aspect of augmentation. And although he was primarily centered on building the tools for individuals to build better tools, the bootstrapping idea that Christina alluded to, um, he did center uh, community in this, and also I think here's where our opportunity, our meaning all the people in this meeting and all the others that might be attracted to this, is that there's a proliferation of tools right now, and I know some of you know that I harp on this. Uh, Engelbart wrote about humans using language, artifacts, methodology, and training. And so much of the evolution and so much of the spotlight is still on the tools. I think that there's a huge opportunity in regard to the methodology and the training. And you know, I think training is maybe a funny word here. I think education is part of that as well. I know that I really have not been following the tools on a regular basis the way I had for years, and very recently there's a huge proliferation of them. And I wish there was something that helped me make sense of it. I guess I would start with a taxonomy of the different kinds of tools. I mean, everything from social annotation to kind of personal databases to note-taking tools, wikis. There are so many of them. Is there a taxonomy that exists? Um, if not, wouldn't it be nice if there was one? I know that my friend Robin Good did create a taxonomy of collaboration tools. I'll put the URL in it, and he tells me that he doesn't really maintain this anymore, so it's not really up to date. But there's a this is really just a kind of a rough uh, draft of something. I'd love to take a look at something like that, and then branching out from that, talking about methodology. Um, how do you use these things? What are the use cases? Can somebody run me through an example? You know, anything from a video to a little animation to just a, you know, step by step notes on that, and how do these tools work with each other? You know, really, the last time I grappled with that issue myself was uh, over 10 years ago when I wrote Net Smart. I was using DevenThink, um, which is a spectacular uh, wide end of the tunnel for gathering and classifying information. Some are you are people familiar with that? Anybody familiar with that? Um,
Yeah.
it's a very powerful tool, and it's very complicated. And I used that to feed into Scrivener, which was a great tool for big writing projects. And I developed a workflow. I guess I never really described what it was, but I do remember that every stage of the workflow was every time that I uh, my brain touched one of the pieces of information that I had gathered, I had to decide um, whether and how to move it to the next stage, because the wide end of the information gathering funnel had hundreds of times more information than I could fit into a book. And in fact, some people complained that that book had 500 footnotes. There actually could have been 5,000 footnotes. But when I moved things from DevenThink into um, Scrivener, I went through a process of thinking about and paraphrasing and deciding. So that workflow using DemonThink, I'm sure there are people who have already done that a little bit. Also use Personal Brain. Probably everybody here is familiar with that, with Jerry's Brain. That was, you know, another way of taking a lot of information and looking at the connections between it. And I suppose it's a kind of note-taking um, application. Uh, so I think that that is a opportunity for a community. And so that's, I think, what what would be important would be to to start some attempts to start making sense of all these tools in a context, so that uh, the creators of tools and the users of tools would have some common framework to begin community of practice and discussions around these. So I've talked for a few minutes here. I don't want to spend all of my time talking at this. I have some other notes about what would be good to talk about, but I want to open the floor to any reactions to what I've said.
Thank you so much, Harold. Howard, sorry. um, I would love to just invite new folks to Robert, if you could put that Google Doc in there. Grab a role, decide where you want to focus. You can stay in the Zoom chat if you're more comfortable there. You can take notes in the Google Doc. If you're more comfortable there, you can have the whiteboard, mind map space. And we're exploring Howard's work today, choosing those roles and trying to make sense together. And there'll be a post-call process to do that as well. Anybody can jump in. Questions, thoughts?
I think there's a lot of churning in the past year for new tools. And so it's a little tough to impose a taxonomy on top of those. I've been trying to nag developers to kind of claim a space more explicitly themselves, to say, like, my tool is for scientific researchers because they have this problem, or my tool is for visual thinkers because here's why these other tools don't help, or something like that. And it's pretty hard to get a sense of those things, or you end up, I mean, maybe it is maybe there is a taxonomy there in the sense that you could probably create a half dozen buckets and, assign each tool into one of those buckets based on its homepage or something like that. And then the challenge is, how do you tell the difference between them? The things that are all the visual tools versus all the graph-based tools and things like that. So it's definitely a messy, churning kind of process right now of trying to figure out what everyone's trying to do and why they're bothering to like, why build another tool?
Bill, when you were saying that, before you got to the word bucket, I was thinking the problem with the word taxonomy is that it implies buckets, and that
Yeah.
there is a way of dealing with messy info, which is whether or not you use buckets, you can also use tags.
Right.
And I think that whatever is created has to be created in a way that it's flexible and can be changed as we learn more. But I think that the attempt to begin to introduce people who are not familiar as we are with all of these tools to what they might use and what problems they have that these tools can help them solve. So I'm putting these out there as potential tasks for a group such as this that's interested in the space and the tools. Maybe it would come to something useful, maybe it won't, but I think that I'm throwing this out there, that an attempt to categorize these and is a first step, and as I said, the methodology is the next step. Is okay, so this is a note-taking tool. How do you use it? How would I use it? Or this tool differs from that because it uses links or tags instead of buckets and folders. That's what I meant by taxonomy. I mean very loosely, to try to get all these tools described in relationship to each other. Maybe it's a mind map. Maybe maybe it's something like the brain. Maybe it's useful to try to create views of this space with different kind of frameworks. Maybe it's a wiki, and maybe it's also a brain. That's a number of possible tasks. I think what I'm getting at is that there's a community around people who create and use these tools, but there's not really a larger community about how are we going to introduce and further the evolution of these tools beyond the I want to use the word geeks, but people who are really focused on the tools because they're cool, rather than people who have different tasks and don't know that there are tools that can help them with those tasks. And then the next step, really, personally, as someone who's this has all moved beyond my ability to follow it. I don't really know the difference between Rome and Obsidian, for example. I'd like to see someone take a simple task and in a 4-minute explanation, whether that's in the form of video or bullet points, show how you would use that and what the advantages of using that are. And maybe if you can array a number of those little, mini tutorials around them, that can begin to build something around this idea of methodology, of going beyond the tools are available to how are they used. And I think maybe parallel to that, or after that, how is this ecology of different tools useful? How can you move from one tool to another? And that seems to me to be one of the important things about Well, two of the more important things about if you want to form a community online is that they have to have a strong common interest. Obviously, the people here share a common interest, but then there's a common task. Common tasks are really something that fleshes out that the relationships among the people in a community and the way that people collaborate. And in fact, it's, you know, collaboration is what a lot of the tools are about. What are the methodologies for using different tools to collaborate? The use of different real-time roles during a video session like this, I think, is an example of an attempt at a collaboration methodology using well, what was to me a new tool when video conferencing became available for education. I did teach a course that I think a couple of you may have participated in on augmented collective intelligence. And I found the syllabus for that, and you know, keep in mind this is pretty old, and I'll put a link in the chat here. You know, I just took my syllabus and pasted it into a Google Doc, and I mean this to be a starting point, and I offer it. It's not something that I seek to own, and it's something that's modifiable as a place to start. Imagine a bunch of modules that would engage people both. And what I tried to do in this was to balance the theory and the practice, and to balance the presentation of material and the kind of collaborative sense making around that material. So there's another example of something that could help a community move forward, is to take this taxonomy, or you know, for lack of a better name, the methodology, and put together some little trainings around it. I think more of it as an education than a training. A training meaning how do you use the tool, but how do you use the tool in context, and what does the tool mean, and how did it come about, and where's it going? Again, I'll pause for feedback on that, or anybody who wants to take it a little further.
Howard, it sounds like you're calling for field building of a new field of exploring sense making in this compute empowered way, but you're calling for the building of the processes more than the building of the tools. Is that right?
Yes, correct. I mean, it was thinking about what do I want to say to this group of people, and it seemed to me that we're talking about a nascent community of interest and community of practice, and how do you grow a community? How you grow a community is you make something together that will attract others to the task, and you know, it's like writing a book. Once you have an idea of what you're doing and a rough outline, and you get started on it, you see it in a different way, and you change what you're doing, and you expand your focus on that. And it seems to me that this could be a starting point for bringing together all of the people who are interested in this. So yes, Christina, that's exactly what I had in mind. What do you think about that?
I'd love to open the floor. I mean, I clearly, I think there's a need for it. I organized this call. I'd love to open the floor to folks who haven't had a chance to chime in.
I definitely have a few thoughts I wanted to share. One big thing to me, sort of in direct response to that, is that there are a lot of these kind of specific methodology communities that already exist, things like building second brain, linking your thinking, that kind of stuff, that are essentially, opinionated versions of what you're talking about. That really, they don't focus on a particular tool necessarily. Linking your thinking is sort of obsidian based, but also encompasses, just the general idea of linking notes together. It's broadened out from the obsidian focus. Building a second brain, they talk about Evernote a lot, but there are lots of other tools as well that are discussed, and it's more about the methodology. So I think that's one thing just to highlight, is that there are these methodology oriented, communities that talk about tools that can best enable a certain methodology. I like the idea of having a broader consideration, and I think that it should encompass or at least account for some of these specific methodologies. So there's sort of the sphere of methodology, and there's the sphere of tools, right? So you've talked a lot about there's all these tools. How can we best understand these tools? There's also the methodology sphere of things, and then the really interesting, I think, exciting thing is how those things maybe connect together, and getting a taxonomy of the methodologies. And then how they can kind of connect to different tools and stuff, because it's going to vary by person, right? Different people have different preferences for workflows, for tools, for all that kind of stuff. And just real quickly, I'll say the other thing is there is a Key Productive YouTube channel that kind of quickly reviews, various tools, oftentimes TFT tools, but sometimes, productivity tools, whatever. There's also another YouTube channel, 2 Minute Papers. And so the idea occurred in my head of combining the two of those, where you literally have just 2 minute walkthrough of, TFT tool of the day. Cause literally it's almost every day that a new one is coming out. So it could be a collaborative thing where different people just make a new video, literally a 2 or 3 minute video could be a low barrier, a low effort way of, getting some visibility of tools. So thanks.
Lightning talks. I see that Marc-Antoine, you have your hand up for a while.
Yes, sorry for arriving late. I did not realize that this would be the topic. I've been thinking a lot about creating a kind of community of practice, or even association around. For me, they are two totally intertwined, but somewhat distinct things, which is the practices of collective intelligence as done by facilitators and people who have this great experience with group dynamics, and the tool builders who are trying to make, to do augmented, I've been using that term also, Howard, the augmented collective intelligence, to scale up and to facilitate it within the asynchronous setting. And I think if we're going to do this, it's absolutely important to first be aware of one another. I mean, I'm in touch with so many different communities working on these things independently, and how are collective intelligence researchers working so much alone and on their own is perfectly ridiculous. We can and should do better, but we are meeting. We're doing in these. We're doing these. I'm part of many circles. People are trying to assemble, but I think we can go much further in that direction. And something I'd like to get out of an association also is maybe agreement on principles of what collective intelligence is and can do. The question of transparency and explainability. One thing that I believe very strongly on is what we need is an ecosystem of tools, and that means those tools have to interact and interoperate. And my basic, I always come back to the question of standard data formats, so our tools can build on one another, but it's really more about also helping one another. We're all trying to get traction and to show the value of collective intelligence, especially the visibility of collective intelligence as opposed to the opaqueness of AI processes, for example. And telling that tale will be stronger if we can tell that tale together and eventually get concrete realization projects together. So that's really the value of pluralism, the value of the ecosystemic approach, and the value of transparency and explainability, I think, are very unique to what collective intelligence can offer. Over.
Can I just say, yeah, I really would like to inject a little bit of system-oriented view. I think many of you we are here, attended some of the Two for Thoughts rocks meetings and others, and I'm sure you're aware that Fission and the whole Web3 movement, the whole decentralized web movement, is trying to change the whole paradigm for IT. And related to that, they're really thinking about, we actually need to change the very ecosystem, the very system where we build the tools, and also what it really calls for is a brand new vision, because basically as long as we are in the current paradigm, say on the web, because most of these tools are web-based, as long as we are in the current paradigm, there's no way we can do it, because you may have personal tools, but the ways of being able to communicate, interpersonal communication, that just doesn't exist. I mean, so we really think that we really need to think at a higher level, because in a way, if you think about it, all this knowledge processing, so it's not just tools for thoughts, it's really learning. I learned a new word, symmetry, that it's all about mutual learning. And we really need to facilitate that, where actually it needs to be people-centered, because all the learning, all the work happens in people. And at the moment, we go into the places where the apps are, instead of the apps coming to us, and Fission is pointing that way, towards that way. So I really think that that's the approach that I would take, because then if people are able to communicate and create their own interest-based communities based on trust, that kind of thing, that it could grow. We are too much fragmented. So I would like to raise a discussion, not about the individual tools, and I wrote it in the chat, but the key to this is interoperability and exchangeability and people-centeredness. And that really needs that paradigm shift. Okay, thank you very much.
I see Simon has his hand up, and we also have amazing facilitators, a few other amazing facilitators. So I would actually invite, if you are a facilitator, what would you want to say to these tool nerds that we have gathered here?
I'm not sure I'm going to answer that, Christina, but I think I'll just like to throw in a perspective into the middle here, which is what's been coming up in the chat. I do think that because our culture is so kind of individually biased anyway, I think my impression is that if you build a tool for individuals, it will tend to stick in an individual frame. And I would love to see tools which are built from the ground up, essentially as collaborative or collective. I think that's just, I'll just leave it there for the moment.
Well, there is, of course, a need for and a desire for and a place for both. The issue that I'm raised is, we don't really understand a lot about the relationships between individual augmentation tools and collective intelligence tools, and what is the relationship between collaboration and collective intelligence, and this is one that I've been thinking about. Are we talking about thinking tools or knowledge tools or both, or what's the relationship between them? I know that I use the brain, for example, to take a lot of pieces of information that I've gathered and try to understand the relationships between them and build a kind of map that would then enable me to think, that it would be a kind of visual cache for all of the pieces of the puzzle, and that by looking at it and rearranging it, it would help me think. But again, there's a methodology issue. How do you use a knowledge tool as a thinking tool? I think those who participated in my course, one of the things we did was social bookmarking, which is both an individual tool, and I think that's a good example of something that individuals use, but by its nature is collective in the sense that you can I guess Digo and Delicious are extremely ancient now, but they're very useful in the sense that if you're interested in a particular topic, then you can find that tag and you can find the people who have been collecting information around that tag, and you can find the ones who seem to know what they're talking about. And you can also have group bookmarking in which people will bookmark around a topic to a group. And one workflow we developed was, okay, a group decides on a subject that you want to explore, and then you each individually go out and bookmark what you think are useful resources, and you bookmark them to the group. And in Digo, when you do that, each bookmark can have a comment thread with it, and through the comment thread, try to make sense of how that particular resource relates to your common goal. And through those conversations, you're now taking these disconnected pieces of knowledge and you're thinking about them and you're trying to make sense of them. That was really a simple example, but I think that there are all kinds of possibilities with tools that exist now. I just haven't seen any real exploration about the relationship between thinking tools and knowledge tools and the methodology for using them. I want to open the floor for discussion of that, but I also want to talk about AI as a tool for thought as well.
I can chime in for a moment on individual versus collective, right? So am I coming through? Okay, I think so. I mentioned in the chat that my team builds tools for scientists, and we've only recently properly understood that they all need to be multiplayer. I was reading the old MediaSpace papers and looking at photographs of the workspace at Xerox PARC, like the physical workspace, that there were, you know, the early kind of Bill Buxton and crew MediaSpace work was being done. And one of the things that struck me, as opposed to the workspaces in my science organization today in Australia, is the offices. And the offices had glass walls and doors and Venetian blinds opening into a common space. So that affords the user of that office every possible level of privacy or collective grouping. Right? That, like, a Venetian blind is an analog device for deciding how open you want to be. You can close up the office completely, you can open it completely, you can open the doors, you can enter and one of the things I've started to notice is that control and legibility of who you're sharing with, the level of access, that's really crucial.
You know, there's a building at Stanford that was built for collaboration between biological scientists and other disciplines. And they built it so that all of the offices have a window on the walkways that you have to use to get around. And all of the offices have whiteboards that face the window and whiteboards that don't face the window. There's a book that I've been recommending to people, and I'm pretty sure that some of you are aware of it, called The Extended Mind, that's talking about all of the ways that we think that's not necessarily in our brains. And of course, artifacts are an example of that, but two of the examples that the author uses are your workspace, the way your workspace is arranged that was just discussed. And the other part was that there's an enormous amount of social, even if you're working alone, you are building on the work of others, that you can't really disconnect the individual and the collective in that sense. I wanted to touch on this issue of AI. You know, a year ago when GPT-3 first became available, I wrote a piece on my Patreon. I don't know how many of you have access to Patreon, but this is publicly available. You don't have to pay to see it. But I guess it's pretty common now, but it was using AI as a tool for content farms. So we all know what content farms are, and you know, they employ people who write kind of insipid things really rapidly for not very much money, and then they use SEO and advertising to try to collect money on it. So this is to help you do that. So my example was that I had been told by Edgar Mitchell, who was one of the Apollo astronauts, that every American astronaut or Russian cosmonaut who had done an extravehicular activity, a spacewalk, had a transcendental experience. So I posed this question to GPT-3, which was astronauts and cosmonauts having transcendental experience. And a couple of seconds later, I got back an outline with chapters devoted to individual astronauts and cosmonauts who had transcendental experiences, and links in that outline. So I could then write that article much more rapidly, having done 3 seconds of research. How can that be used as a tool for that? You know, AI for IA is something that AI people have not really talked about a great deal. So I would include that as a thinking tool as well. I'm just throwing out a lot of things here that I think that if you try to mess with them, that something will become clear, and that there's a clear opportunity to try to create this context for this nascent community.
I'll chime in and say that there's a really significant field building exercise being done by the National Science Foundation right now on augmented intelligence with a lot of AI researchers. So if anybody is interested, I'm dropping the link. And Oshan, you have had your hand up for a while.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, the AI angle is interesting. It's moving so quickly for me. It's kind of hard to wrap my head around and have a specific take on that. But the brief thought occurred to me of like having a group of people that are then all sort of collectively having a conversation with the AI around a topic. I think we'll be able to do that soon, so that'll be interesting. But what I wanted to more talk about was, you know, there's this talk about you know, all these new tools. Some of them are collaborative, some of them are not, all that kind of stuff. And you know, I think new tools are great. You know, adding collaborative options into tools is great, but I kind of question whether it's really a tooling issue. You know, we've had one example that I think about is like, you know, collective intelligence is sort of, you know, it's conversation. Maybe it's coming to consensus with some kind of, it could be a systems-based approach, but it could also be a practice-based approach. So it's like, we're using a very simple tool, we're using a forum, we're using a wiki, whatever. The tool is not necessarily going to, you know, allow us to come to some valuable output, right? The practice is often the most important thing. And so like, I just want to highlight, I was part of one of the Rome book clubs, for example, and they're collectively using Rome, which works great for some people. Some people love how Rome works, and some people like me just don't like everything being in an outline, et cetera. So for the people who loved it, they could collaborate, they could, you know, use Rome for this purpose, and it worked great because they came up with these practices, because they came up with these ways of approaching it. And so there was agreement on a tool that works for these people, and a practice and approach that will make that lead to this, you know, commonly desired outcome of, you know, whatever it was, right? Understanding this book, writing notes on it, et cetera. But I think the key thing I wanted to say is that, first of all, I think the tools to do this stuff kind of already exist to a certain extent. It's more about like, how do we, use these tools? Like a forum, for example, Discourse as a forum, you could absolutely use that. It has wiki functions built in. You can use it for collective sense making if you want. It's just about getting common agreement on it. But that leads to the other thing I wanted to say, which is that no one tool works for everyone, and at least not yet. And so I think a point that was made earlier of the importance of interoperability, right? So what I'm really interested in is different representations of the same data or even the same process in a way, right? So it's like, if I prefer an outliner, it'd be great if I could write my thoughts in an outline, but have that be shared, have that be part of a conversation that maybe also is, connecting with a forum and it's interoperating through Markdown or something like that. But I can be in the tool that I like, they can be in the tool that they like, et cetera. That I think is when you're really going to get this more cross organizational or cross community and cross-pollination between these people, because like the Rome community, their brain works like Rome, right? And the the Dev and Think community, the brain community, their brains work to some degree like those tools. Obviously, there's a diversity of perspectives within them, but there is something in common to those people that is kind of siloed in the use of those applications and the particular way that they work. So anyway, that's a lot, but I just thought that was kind of an important thing, is like, different people are going to want to work in different ways. And so no one tool is necessarily going to do that. Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I rant about periodically is whenever there's like a new tool that comes out, there's a fresh discussion about like, oh, but how does it interoperate with other tools? And people are trying to like push things into stuff where they can pour content from one tool into the other, which doesn't work very well if they have different metaphors and styles and things. And so I keep saying, the web is a freaking ecosystem, people. If you can get access to it, whether you wrote it in an outline or you made a mind map or something like that, if it can be viewed in a browser, then you're 90% of the way there. And so let's just focus on getting that level of sharing happening before we worry about like, how can I take a tool that I wrote in Rome and then change my mind and edit in Obsidian next week? Like, that's just such a different category of problem for people working together.
Hi guys, I want to retro back to Ocean's idea a little bit, because I'm with the product manager background. I think the tools will shape the user's behavior strongly. So basically, every tool will have their own way of managing informations and knowledges. But I think to manage the information is a task, and it's pretty complicated for a lot of people. So for this type of things, habit would not kill it. It's like you have to train yourself, you have to adopt some methodology to make it work or to make it efficient. So I have a question about this. Is there like is there a matrix to measure the efficiency of different methodologies or the efficiency of different tools that we are talking about?
I think this comes back again to context heavily, because I think there's, also being a product manager kind of person, there's collaboration that happens within a product team that's very structured and, ultimately comes down to the outcome in terms of features that you build or content that you write that makes users effective, in your business, which is very different than collaborating across, say, a community that's having a discussion about, whether to spend more money to grow their local school or something like that. Like, the dynamics are so different. I don't think you can talk about tools or processes being efficient, ignoring that context difference. So it always comes back to, who's trying to use it and where, and that's going to drive hugely. Like, I think lots of tools can be shifted to whatever process and context is there. It's really more about the process fitting in the context. And then you can usually shoehorn lots of different tools there. But if you're being unrealistic about the mismatch between process and context, then no tool is going to solve that problem for you. And sometimes people try and use a tool to kind of quietly, passive aggressively force in a process. But if you're not honest and clear and transparent about that up front, then you're again creating all this sort of itchy conflict along the way where people are sort of being nudged into something without somebody being honest about, here's how we think we should work together, and having an opportunity to disagree with that.
So trust is important for collective intelligence.
Yes, and I think again, it also comes back to what's your expected output. Like if you have people that have totally different expectations of where the group is going, what the group's purpose is, I think that's again dooming it to failure. It's like Howard mentioned Jerry Michalski, who's a core person in this open global mind kind of group, and I was active in that for a few weeks and then realized oh, I can see that the real goal here is to talk a lot for 2 years and possibly give each other consulting and facilitator gigs. And that's not really, either of those things is really, super interesting to me anymore. And so I'm interested in processes that lead to tools and actions and, outputs. And so if that's not people's goal, they're going to, again, be fighting with each other all the time. And I think Yuri disagrees. I'd love to see what.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I've been taking part in there quite a few, and certainly been following for a year all the discussions and the plethora of ideas that tool builders can run with was amazing. So I don't know, you may not have been there when Matt Sayer came up with this thing about the dream space and so many other great things. So I think that was actually a good thing to talk about things, because it's actually matures ideas. So you may be right about all the other things, but there was definitely valuable work I'm glad I've been part of it for quite a long time.
Yeah, totally valuable ideas being shared. But do we need another group doing that? It just feels very also kind of redundant to 100 conversations and 100 groups over the last 20 years. Which may be okay.
If I may, of course, I think trust, you started with trust, and I think it's absolutely central, and we need to go back to that. People build trust by working together, talking together. So of course, there's going to be all these little groups working in their corner, learning to know one another. The question is how to get beyond that. And I agree that going from sharing knowledge and sharing trust to acting beyond this initial trust building environment is extremely important. But I think each little bubble is where people learn to collaborate. The question is how to scale that up. Yes, but I don't think we can avoid people going through that exercise in whichever small groups. But I really want to capture this notion of trust. One of the key books I read recently in collective intelligence, The Enigma of Reason, really goes into how thinking is a collaborative activity, and we get much better result from people who not only, of course, there's requisite diversity, but people who think together with a notion of shared goals. And this is really key. If you don't have that, people are in competition mode, and that's not extremely productive. But if people approach a similar problem with different perspectives, actually they do much more than any one individual member of the group can do in general. And that's pretty well observed. It's a fascinating book I recommend to anybody. And yes, so the question is, now that we have these groups working necessarily individually, how can we extend that? And it's really the fractal nature. And again, the data sharing is important because, of course, as Ocean said, they'll coalesce around a methodology that they're comfortable with or a tool that they're comfortable with. And how to go beyond that to cross information between tools, communities, and so on, so that it doesn't stay contained in these little collaboration starting pods. Over.
So does this group have an asynchronous medium that you use to have ongoing conversations beyond these synchronous meetings?
We're trying to set up a wiki, and maybe somebody who actually has been in the group longer than I, but we do have the Luma community, which you signed up for this event through, also sort of has ongoing and comment function and that sort of thing for now, but it's pretty lightweight.
Because it's my opinion that if you really want to take the tasks we're talking about here and start to build them in a way that can evolve and that can involve other people, you need a kind of a permanent asynchronous space to do that. I know you can do it with wikis. I happen to be partial to message boards like Discourse, but you could do it with a Google group. It doesn't have to be fancy, but something that enables you to have persistent conversations that can be categorized, and a new person can get up to speed on what's been talked about, and which people can then create new categories, new conversations. Over.
I know that Tools for Thought this Tools for Thought Rocks community was catalyzed by Boris Mann, and he has been very generous and encouraging and letting me come in and start organizing these. If you would like to help, it's not just for organizing events, it's also for organizing asynchronous spaces and such. So right now there's only maybe 3.5 of us trying to do this with off the side of our desks with lots and lots of other obligations. So I think if the community's interested in that, show up. Yes, absolutely. Get in touch.
So the discussion of the disparate tools, interoperability, all that, as well as I think it was Bill who mentioned everything is on the web, right? Like we've got that kind of outlet commonality already. Kind of made me think like maybe the part of the answer is to have a sort of meta tool that is built for the purpose of interconnecting these different communities and discussion spaces and whatever. The model that kind of came to mind is a lot of these kind of web-oriented highlighting tools where you can go to any web page, you can highlight something, you can make comments. They have some of them. I'm forgetting the name of anyway, but some of them have a
hypothesis and mimics.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of them have a community element to them, right? You can highlight something on a page and then there can be discussion around it and stuff like that. In a certain way, this is potentially a way to break the barriers between some of these communities and have sort of meta discussion. Like this person made this point on this topic here, and this person made a different point on the same topic here, and then you can have a discussion cross community and stuff. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting idea. It's not a solution or something kind of like, oh, maybe this could work, or maybe a tool that was built for that purpose.
Well, sorry to jump in. That's exactly what we've been trying to build. Is going from personal management to annotation, integrating that annotation into your mind graph, and actually building communities around it, which are all interpersonal. So it's been very, very hard. We have technical issues with the whole. If you are at the bleeding edge, you bleed. Because all these decentralized technologies are not quite there, but I certainly would like this community to offer something where we can actually do that, and that would actually be what Matthias dream space, which is basically interpersonal communication. How can we have conversations which are continuous without being synchronous? And the conversation, we don't go somewhere to have the conversation, but the conversation come to us. So that's really and I also, now this is a great opportunity. I think this is the 60th year of Engelbart's conceptual framework. Anybody interested in actually sitting down with 60 years of experience do that kind of work, because we really need to reconsider that, and we really need to build a new conceptual framework for augmenting human intellect. That's a call for action. Anybody interested, please, I hopefully we will have a call about that. Yeah. Anybody, hands, can I see any hands who's interested in working on a computing or conceptual framework reloaded or paradigm regained? Okay, well, we will connect. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And use the tool to bootstrap, and the community that is building the tools to bootstrap itself. We really should be able to now do the same, have an augmentation research community on the web, live, bootstrapping and building the tool. That's a call for action from me. Thank you. Anybody?
Howard needed to drop off. He actually stayed on 15 minutes longer than he had. We have the Google Doc. If you would like to help synthesize this immense wealth of information asynchronously after the event, we will have the recording and we will have the chat as well. And we'll ground it in the Google Doc, but I really agree that probably both a very, very slow wiki and a faster moving, but also asynchronous space for this community is needed. So if you want to help, I know that the three organizers who are doing these right now don't have time among us, but we need help. And I really encourage you to read, Robert, maybe you could grab the link, the pedagogy rules that I think are linked at the top of the Google Doc we put together for the day. I found it much harder than I expected to try and process information as well as map it at the same time with this big a group and with this much going on. So I would love any reflection of looking at Howard's process at the same time as hearing about it. And if anybody's interested in trying it again, but on a different topic, I would love to do that. And I really encourage anybody who hasn't had a chance, or maybe is a little more introverted or less likely to speak up, please feel free. I want to get all voices in the room. Now all us chatty extroverts are being quiet.
Is there a way of doing it with breakouts somehow? I mean,
Sure.
I'm not quite sure how, but you know.
Yeah, we have 25 minutes left. We could do a quick 1, 2, 4 all. I think that would work. So we'll have just 1 minute where we all reflect. Jump off if you need to jump off. Thank you for coming. I love that idea, Simon. Quick show of hands. Is everybody into doing a quick breakout session? Yes, yes, maybe, kind of. Yeah, okay. So 1 minute, just silence, write down, and then I'll put us in breakout rooms of 2 and then 4 and then all. I'll see if I can set that up in the meantime. So just write down the one key thing that you got, and then you'll swap that with your partner and then bring together to a group of 4 whatever came out of the 2. Awesome. Just let people who have to leave drop off. think with a couple people not able to do it, messaging me and not wanting anybody to be left alone, I'm going to just start with 3 to 4 people per room automatically, and hop in when you're ready. And I'll just split the time. We'll have 10 minutes in the small breakouts and then come back and to the bigger group.
Oh, cool. We're being recorded. Excellent.
Oh, we get to see the twins.
Yeah, this is Sophie. Actually, I got the blur on, but yeah. Well, I thought this was a breakout room. I was confused. Maybe I didn't join the room I was supposed to join.
No, I think I just joined a room because everybody was in breakouts, and the recording just came with me.
Oh, okay.
I can pause it.
Cool.
You've gone sideways, Viveka. I love it. It's kind of fun to have sideways people.
Yes, why not be sideways sometimes?
Is that
Yuri, it looked like you muted.
okay? That's fine.
Awesome. We'll just do a quick report back to the bigger group and then end. I'll keep the Zoom open for anybody who wants informal, unrecorded chat after. Viveka, if you don't mind beginning, because I was in your room, and then whoever else would like to speak for the other groups, chime in afterwards. Thank you.
So hi, I was I was chosen to express our group's kind of feeling of incoherence, feeling of waiting for an epiphany, or more optimistically, maybe being on the cusp of one, and a feeling that maybe there needs to be a step change. We have a kind of a gallimaufry of tools for information. And then maybe that's built on the previous revolutions in personal computing and the web, which were tools for organizing and structuring information. And what's missing now is tools, methods, language for structuring people, because what we're using at the moment, the really big popular tools and methods and language for structuring people are these very single-minded surveillance capitalism tools like Facebook that just drive people into corners. So I think there were things from the conversation earlier about the necessity of building trust in little communities that feel important to us. Over.
Thank you. Simon, anything to add from that group, or? Great.
No, that's great.
Somebody not in that breakout. Go ahead.
Okay. We talked about trust a lot. We started with how, trust enables deep listening and high efficiency knowledge transfer, and trust as a membrane between groups. And Kobe said one thing that's wonderful about note-taking tools is that the notes can become a proxy for trust, and it can speed up the trusting process because you have this trace of notes that serves as your, in a way, your avatar, not the word he used, and reduce the overwhelm of this slow process of getting to learn one another. We had another conversation around the trust, the social trust graph versus earning epistemic trust, and very contextual, the different trust contexts or sub-community contexts we evolve in. And one thing we said is that on the one hand, trust can be efficient because I trust you, I don't verify everything you say, but you need to go between this time where you're efficient and trustful and this time where you verify that you're not caught in an epistemic bubble. So there's a kind of two different times of, creating and verifying. So I think those were the main themes we went through about the fragmented social trust and how can we scale it up beyond our fragmented communities to learn from one another. And yeah, the traces as a proxy. Over. Anything else I missed?
Perfect. Just a small thing we discussed, I think that brought by Kila, which is trust is not in general. It's in this case is more specific in specific domains. Just as Christina mentioned in the chats, I trust you as a person, but may not trust that you understand me, or may trust you are some expert in some domain. Over.
Was there a third breakout? I think. Is there somebody here reporting from a breakout session that did not have Viveka or Mark Antoine? Yeah.
Graziano, yes, please.
Thanks. And we started talking about war and the worrying about war in Europe, let's say, and which is not strictly related to our topic this evening, but anyway. And after we talk about maybe the idea of the importance of places where people meet and they exchange ideas, and also about the importance of dialogue, the relevance of dialogue, and having tools. And also Guri talked about the idea of spreading and distributed way of thinking and relating ideas and going, I'm not sure to understand everything, but going, trying to push our ability to understand, to experiment in different way, to exchange ideas. But I'm not sure if I summarized everything. Guri, help me.
No. I think we were talking about how we could work together and figure out how we can actually work together. And yeah, I really think that this idea of somehow finding the way of collaborating about the new conceptual framework, I think I really still push for that, because that's what I was telling Graziano, that the war next door basically means that, nice little earners, nice little thing won't help us. We really got to get the most out of the work we've been doing, or I've been doing for 20 years, have its maximal potential actually being done. That's way more important. The ideas are way more important than getting some little thing working. And I was also saying that about this is actually interesting that, I mean, the words matter, you know, articulation matter. This is it. I mean, we got this whole network thinking to think because Rome put together the network thinking word, you know, knowledge graph didn't cut it, you know. I've been talking about personal knowledge graph for 15 years. Nobody understood me. Oh, network thinking. Ah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So try it on you. Really I don't know whether you heard about the indie web. We want to do the indie web with a Y, which is really interpersonal, not that own your own host, but own your work in your own network. So anyhow, that's what we've been talking about. Yeah, thank you.
I want to add on at the end just a thought from our group that was from Viveka, that all our tools reinforce tribalism because they do the thing they do as much as possible. And I just thought that was such an amazing way to say that. And also that kind of related in the conversation about what makes a community or how do groups form we were having. Robert said, how do we keep the community from being just a branded economic space where it's about transactionality rather than relationality and trust building?
And what do we mean by the community? If that's what the community is, then God save us. I mean, a community as a group of individual, you know, isolated group of individuals sort of interacting in a very kind of like superficial way. No, not a community for me. But yes, that's what often is referred to by community.
No, I really want to jump on this one, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important to have clarity of purpose. What do we expect from forming a community? I tried to go into that when I first spoke. I think we need to be able to speak with a kind of more unified voice about why we believe it's important to do this, and not my work or your work, but the whole general field we're all trying to build. And the other aspect is we have to reinforce one another. And that's, for me, the other reason to go ecosystemic. Like, if our tools interoperate, then, you know, whatever I can say, well, my tool has added value for being able to talk to all these other tools, and vice versa. That you're not buying one approach, you're buying an ecosystem of them for each of us. That, for me, is
evolution.
But it's not so much. Of course, you said go beyond the commercial. I think we really want to push, and Jury was right in saying we're pushing the idea of augmentation and of going beyond tribalism and scaling up cooperation, and being able to give collective reasons for whatever proposed course of action or understanding. I think this is really, we want to be able to speak about to that possibility collectively.
Well, can I just quickly, I'm not sure whether Gian is here, but one of the things that we're thinking about is it's recognizing how we interbeings, you know, that it's the human is the focus, you know, not the machine. Okay, it's our and the dignity of being. That's the way I would put it. That's the whole point. The whole point is to see yourself in the other, or be yourself through the other, and facilitate that understanding, you know, and viewpoints. That's the other most important thing, is to get out of the ping plane, you know, and actually see the other's viewpoint. And I just finished this. I was talking Graciano. Ken Wilber said somewhere, nobody is that smart to be wrong all the time. Okay, And pluralism, plurality of opinion, plurality of views. And just one final thing. This is I learned it from Hannah Arendt, the Lessing quote. Let each man say what he deems to be true, and let truth itself be condemned unto God. Or something along these lines, you know. I mean, it's values. There are, I mean, this is really, ultimately, it all boils down to, do you believe in human values? Are you on team human or not? That's the question. Because everything else goes against it. Over.
Amazing. Thank you all. I'll keep Zoom open for just a few minutes. We'll end the recording here.